I'm Tim Garland, and this is the Trail Connection Podcast. Exploring, learning, and connecting through love for the outdoors. Talking everything from hiking, camping, to just plain living. This is the Trail Connection Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Trail Connection Podcast. This week I'm featuring Danny Laurel of the Texas Trailhead. Now, Danny comes out of around Austin, Texas, and focuses a lot on hiking and camping in the area and visiting local state parks, and his website and Instagram pages are loaded with information about Texas hiking. Danny's been a long-time follower of my show, and I'm really appreciative of that, but he's been a big support and encouragement to me along the way for the Trail Connection. So I wanted to get together with him and connect about Texas hiking. Got a little bit of a connection there with my wife being from there, and so I thought it'd be really cool to bring him on and talk about hiking in Texas. So without further ado, here's Danny. So I've been following you for a while now. We got connected probably about a year and a half ago now on Instagram, and I've been following your blog and your podcast a little bit, and I know you've been following my stuff, and I got to tell you, man, I'm really impressed with the knowledge that you have of the local setup out there. You've got a lot of info about local Texas parks and recreation areas, and really an informative. I mean, I guess that's kind of how you got started, right? With the blog, doing just informative stuff about local state parks.
I've always kind of pretended to be a writer, so to speak. One of my other passions is baseball cards, like sports cards, like baseball, football. And so I had some time, so when my daughter, it's kind of this thing, right? When you have your first child, you try to kind of change what your life was like before your child. And for me, I was home a lot more. I wasn't, going out or anything anymore. And so as someone that was born in the 80s, and a lot of us in this age group are the same way, we kind of went back to some of the hobbies that we had when we were kids. And so one of the things that I got back into was baseball cards, because that's what I grew up collecting. I was a huge baseball card guy. And so I was home a lot more. And then you start meeting all these people online that kind of have these shared interests. Social media starts to take off, and meeting all these other baseball card collectors. And, I kind of wanted to share stories about the hobby and my favorite teams and just different collections and stuff. So I started writing about that, thinking I was going to blend my love of baseball cards with just like personal storytelling. I never really had like a journal per se growing up, but I always really enjoyed the kind of my writing classes in high school and college and whatnot. And then so that's kind of where the website started. I've had a couple websites that I've dabbled in based off of passions that I have, but it was not something I really wanted to do when I started hiking again, or when I rediscovered my passion for the outdoors. I was like, the last two times I started something, started a hobby or whatever, I decided to start a website. And those other projects I've since just not been able to keep up with, because running a website, as all this stuff like takes a lot of our time, especially when we're doing it for fun or for like passion projects. So
Yeah.
and I had joked with a coworker at the time. I was like, don't worry, I'm not going to start a website this time. And then, you just, when you enjoy sharing the stories, and that's kind of been the big motivator. And I think that's why I was kind of drawn to the podcast, your podcast. Originally, it was like, this isn't what I thought podcasts had to be. Like we're just kind of sharing a story about why we enjoy being outdoors. And I was like, you know what? I know I said I wasn't going to do this again, but let me share some stories, and maybe some people will find um, some value in it. And I'm really lucky to live where I live in Central Texas. Even though I forgot his name, but somebody called me out from listening to one of my episodes to tell me that I don't actually live in Central Texas. But geography has confirmed that where I live is definitely in Central Texas. So yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
kind of the quick rundown of kind of why that was starting, or why I felt like I should start that project. Mostly just because, I've had some experience with a couple of websites, and I finally felt like, well, maybe this time this information is going to be a little bit more valuable um, to me in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I was drawn to that early on whenever I started following your page, which is how informative everything was about the local area. And, for me being a Florida resident and very ignorant to like, I grew up in a neighborhood that backed up some wetland, and so I would explore out there, but I really was missing out on what Florida had to offer as far as like outdoor activity. And so, early on in the podcast and in this whole project that I'm working on, I was kind of misinformed that, that like I need to get out of Florida to explore. And so when I started following your page, it kind of got me inspired to check out, what's the local area look like around me. And I had several buddies who had recommended some local state parks that wasn't necessarily like the closest one to me that I should check out. And after doing so, man, there's just a vast array of hiking trails and campsites and, boat ramps and all kinds of places like that you can go and just get some outdoor enjoyment. And so it really pushed me to explore local. And so that's really why I wanted to bring you on the show, was really to kind of flesh that out, and really for some people who may be a little lost or overwhelmed with the government websites that are kind of confusing and a little overbearing, like how do you go about exploring local and finding what's in your backyard, the hidden gems in your backyard. So, I mean, I know that's kind of a loaded question, so we can kind of like work into that. But, that's kind of like the point and then the topic that I wanted to cover today. It was just exploring local and kind of getting used to or getting some aware of what's in your backyard. So,
Yeah, so I think for me, it's kind of starting with why I wanted to go out in the first place. I think a lot of people, especially right now with everything that's been going on in the last year, you're seeing this resurgence of people wanting to spend time in the outdoors. So, I grew up as a lot of people, there's a lot of young people in the 80s and 90s. Like I was in the Scouts, so I was in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts, and you kind of are introduced to the outdoors in a fun and a unique way. But as life goes on, your interests change, and just life changes. So you're in school and you're kind of removed from that a little bit. So that's kind of the basis for that. And then as I got older, the reason why I was spending more time out originally was I needed to find a way to kind of burn some of the mental energy that I was piling on myself. One of the big keystones for the Texas Trailhead and kind of how it started was, mental health is a big part of why I started going outdoors, and to find places for me that I could spend time outside. So, to answer your question, the first thing I did was reach out to a friend of mine who I knew spent some time outdoors. And my friend Brooke, shout out to Brooke, she was a big kind of proponent of the local parks. And I think we forget how much, even though there's a fun TV show about Parks and Rec, but I think we forget sometimes how much work the Parks and Rec departments do in your local areas. It's not just about like playgrounds and community swimming pools. Like they are responsible for a lot of the trails in the area. And for me, the city of Austin has an amazing park system. And, Houston has a great park system, and Dallas has a great park system, San Antonio. And so all these cities really have really good outdoor spaces for people to spend time in that a lot of people don't necessarily think of. One, because they just don't think it's hiking because you're in the city, which is not true at all. You can definitely get a good hike in the city. And two, you
Yeah.
just kind of take it for granted because it's in the city, and you're like, well, if I'm going to go hike, I have to go to a state park. And a lot of the places that I was spending time at the very beginning of, for me, just to kind of work on my physical health and my mental health, were the local places. And that's kind of what started the original outdoor thing. The Texas park thing just kind of came from one of the state parks that I went with my daughter, Enchanted Rock State Natural Area. And so that kind of created a whole other foray into the outdoor spaces, because then you're introduced to the state parks, and you're like, okay, well, I've got about 90. Let's make this fun and try to go to as many as possible, because the state parks have their own importance of history in the state, and a lot of them represent some amazing, like I said, historical places, but also just amazing parts of Texas that you may not see otherwise, especially some of the like grander landscapes that you couldn't really get in an urban setting in a city park. So I,
Yeah.
I I think those are two parts to that. Reaching out to your local parks and rec. Just honestly, just Google city, whatever city you're in, and then Parks and Rec, and you'll get a whole list of information, because that's literally what these organizations are for and budgeted for. And one of the posts I did last right before November was kind of a quick version of um, uh, the mid-election year ballots and initiatives. Like, there's a lot of cities that have this money that's allocated in their budget for parks, and sometimes if they don't, if they don't have a lot of input, they're going to be open to suggestions or different types of parks and stuff. So I think that's the biggest
Hmm.
takeaway, is just, your parks and rec department is going to be a great resource in any state, really. I mean, they should all be fundamentally operating the same way.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, and I think that's a neat aspect of the Texas stuff too, is because there's a lot of history out there. A lot of history in all those things, and I know you try to incorporate that in some of the episodes that you do, and you do kind of like the bio of the park, that you go and visit. I think that's really neat. Um, living in Florida, I know there's that history too. It really depends on where you're at. We've got a lot of forts around the coastal areas. Those have a lot of history that you can learn. Going and checking that stuff out. Not so much like long hiking treks or anything like that, but just like little loop trails and things like that. But um, anyway, I just think it's really neat that you're able to kind of diagnose what you got in the area and kind of prioritize, where you're going to visit. And I mean, it seems like every single day you're posting something from another park that I know is not like right around your corner. So I don't know where you get the time to do to do all your traveling. But one question I did want to ask you is what is the closest park to you, and like how far away is that? Where's the closest trail from you?
So I say Austin because most people know where Austin is, but I actually live in a small town just south of Austin. So I'm along the IH 35 corridor. It's pretty much the artery of Texas that runs north and south through the state. So you can go on 35 from Laredo, Texas, which is the city that's has its little sister town on the border of Texas and Mexico, and that highway will take you all the way to Minnesota. So it's a pretty well traveled road. So just south of me along the highway is a city called San Marcos that has a pretty popular university if you're from Texas. And that city has an amazing park system that I never took advantage of when I was actually going to school there, and found out about it much, much later when some coworkers. So my closest park is going to be called Purgatory Creek. It's a huge, it's also like a watershed place. So when it rains, it can get kind of yucky, but the landscapes that you see here in the hill country, you get a lot of really cool oak trees and mesquite trees, and a lot of rocks, limestone, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the parks around here are very similar within the central region before you go out to the East Texas pines or something like the West Texas mountains. So you kind of know what you're going to expect. And some of the more popular parks are popular because they have features that are a little bit different than what you would normally find in the area. So Purgatory Creek is my closest kind of main hiking park that I really enjoy. My closest state park is in Austin, and it's so weird because the state park is right next to a airport. So you get a little bit of the growth of Austin, and you know, it is what it is. People are grumpy that Austin is growing as fast as it is, but we should just be also happy too that we do have this park that we can enjoy because it's really pretty. Camping there is kind of tough if you're a light sleeper because you do hear a lot of traffic and stuff. But that would be my.
Yeah. Okay. About how many miles is that from you? I'm trying to
So,
make a point. That's why I'm
oh
asking
yeah, yeah.
specific.
So my local park is probably 7 miles away, and the state park
Okay.
probably like 20 minutes from me.
Okay. Yeah. So my point being is the closest state park to me is 7 miles as well, and the closest hiking trail is a mile and a half. So when yeah, so whenever we're talking to people who are like, "Well, I don't really get into it because it's so far. You got to go so far away." That's a load of BS. If you really look, there's stuff literally right around the corner. And like I said earlier in the series about, I think it was on the Hidden Gems episode, is a lot of these. If you just pull up a Google map and look at your area within miles, you can find just green patches all over the place that are either some kind of state park or nature reserve or something like that. That's got some access to hiking trails or biking trails or a waterfront something. And so, to listeners out there who are kind of skeptical about, we're just making it sound too easy. It really is. It's really hard to not find places that you can go hike and explore and get out there in the outdoors. And so the reason why I'm asking is because I just really wanted to kind of emphasize that it doesn't, I mean, in a grand state like Texas that's really spread out and huge and massive and a lot of land mass, and then even in Florida, there's stuff right around the corner that you can find and enjoy, and so that's the point. That's why I'm trying to ask that question.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Tim. Like last year, I did a post when everything like shut down. All of the state parks were closed. There was no like, you just had to do this or that. Anyways, but I did this post. I was like, for people that because Facebook was just on fire with people complaining about why
Yeah.
are the parks closed? It's outside, this and that. And I was like, look, when was the last time you walked around your neighborhood and really saw streets that you've never walked on? My daughter and I went walking around our neighborhood down streets that we would never drive on normally, and you see all of that in a whole different perspective. And I think that was one super important because everything was closed. I was furloughed at that point, and a lot of people were just kind of cooped up in their homes, and that's not good. You get really lonely, and it's not good for your old noggin. So I was encouraging people, and kind of the same thing. And I'm glad you brought it up. Just there's the outdoors are available, and exploration is there. And I know I do want to just make a quick point. Like I don't take that opportunity for granted. I know there are some situations where people may not feel comfortable being out and about, but those places are out there. And if you just look, maybe it's just in just kind of a different street or whatever. But, just being outside and walking around sometimes does wonders. And I don't think people do that as much. People just see people like exercising, but take a walk and go down
Hmm.
some streets you've never seen. And it's pretty neat. The trees look different and people's garages look different. And, you can still have fun with it. And it definitely saved me just getting out in the neighborhood and getting some steps in, because otherwise
Yeah.
last summer got bad. And if it wasn't for that, it probably could have gotten worse. So I definitely encourage
Yeah.
people, like you were saying, like you don't need to travel far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was one of those guys complaining, and that I literally have woodland behind my house. All I have to do is hike, hop the fence, and I'm on trails. Like I'm one of those people that really should have kept their mouth shut and just gone outside. And so, um, anyway, I think that that's great. There's so many benefits to getting outside. I know you talk a lot about mental health and physical health and things like that, encouraging folks to get outside and get moving. And I try to do the same thing. I'm a deep thinker. I'm one of these people that really kind of draw a lot from nature when I'm out and about, and so I'm like that too. I'm trying to encourage folks to just get out and just clear your head, just get away from the noise and just take some deep breaths. Take a few steps out there and let the fresh air and the birds and all that stuff just help you just chill and just cleanse your palate and just reset. And so anyway, I think that what you're talking about is great. Even if it's just your neighborhood, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rocky mountain path or some crazy summit that you're climbing to really enjoy just being outside and hearing those noises and stuff. So good point. Good point.
Yeah, and so I'll just I have this thing that really irks me about people in Texas. They're like, "Where can I go get some elevation?" And it drives me up the wall. It's like you don't need elevation to explore some of the most amazing places in Texas. And
Yeah,
it's
come to
like,
Florida. I got some
yeah.
elevation for you.
And it's like people, I don't know, people are kind of pre-setting these or just creating these expectations of what it means to be outside because they see pictures from Colorado and it's like, yeah, I get it. Colorado's amazing. I love Colorado. I love visiting Colorado. The Rocky Mountains are just magnificent. But that's not the only criteria for enjoying outside. And I think for me,
Yeah.
there's kind of a smirk joke that we say, or a lot of people say when fishing. It's like when you're not catching anything that day, you're like, well, at least we got to spend time outside, and it's kind of a half-assed joke when you're fishing. But honestly, when you're just trying to be like in the outdoors, you don't need to go to these grand extravagant amounts. Texas has some amazing rivers, and just a quick sidebar. So one of the things that I think people forget is Texas's land is pretty much private. We don't have that many public lands. So the parks for us are that. We don't have BLM land like you find in New Mexico and Colorado and stuff like that. So we do have to rely on the park system for a lot of that outdoor space. That being said, there are a lot of kind of major organizations that have these outdoor places besides the Texas Parks and Wildlife. You have the Lower Colorado River Authority. They have some amazing parks. You have the U.S. Corps of Engineers. They have some really fun outdoor spaces. So, we're kind of forced to visit some of these places, but there are a lot of them, and that's kind of part of. You don't have to travel far to find some of these places. So I definitely encourage people to look up some of the other park organizations. But um, yeah, just kind of getting back on track. The Texas has a lot of different landscapes, and it doesn't always have to be like, "Where's the peak? I need to find the next peak." It's like, that's fine, but
Yeah. No, actually, that's a good segue because I wanted to give you an opportunity. I saw that post recently where you had a user tell you that there's nothing in Texas is pretty, that it's hard to find good stuff in Texas. And so go ahead, man, let her rip. What do you got to say to him?
I mean, that account is no longer on Instagram anymore. They got the boot, so I guess they got what they needed to have happen. But it was funny though, the people that came to I mean, I honestly don't. I had a conversation with somebody else that has a really big Instagram account that's from Texas, and I did reach out to him, and I was like, just kind of professional, if you can just kind of give me some feedback. But it's like, how do you deal with the business side of it, and then the personal side of it? It's like, we are who we are, but we're also kind of representing something else too. And I don't you won't see me. I have, I think, one picture of me, but you won't normally see myself in a lot of the pictures because I want to make sure the landscape kind of takes the reign of the focus, and that's kind of
Yeah.
the whole point. Like, I want to inspire. That's just what the Texas Trailhead is all about. Not to say anything about anyone else that does that, but there is still the person that's behind the photos, and I was looking for feedback on how you balance that. It's like, obviously you can't just delete everyone that makes you unhappy, because that's kind of how you create dialogue and engagement, et cetera, et cetera. But I was kind of like, really, man? Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing attractive or interesting in Texas. But so the people that kind of came to, I don't want to say my defense, but the defense of the Lone Star State. It's just funny, there's so many. We have we literally have pretty much every ecosystem you can find. We have the East Texas pines, we have the West Texas mountains, you have an amazing river system, you have desert, you have, you know different kind of shifts of the land, creating this just different terrains, and then of course you have the Gulf Coast, which we share. So
Hmm.
or unless you're on the eastern side of Florida, I don't actually know what side of Florida you're on, but
No,
um
you're right. I am on that west side. I'm right
yeah,
there in Tampa Bay, so
yeah.
we share it.
Yeah, and so we have the Gulf Coast, we have the kind of the river water in our ocean, so everyone always thinks it looks gross, not as pretty as the Southwest Florida Naples beaches, but we still have beaches nonetheless. So
Yeah.
we have every kind of area that you can imagine, and I think it's just a matter of kind of getting out there and exploring. I definitely didn't really appreciate that until, honestly, like the last 5 years. You kind of get preoccupied
Yeah.
with life, and once you kind of stop and put some priorities, or rearrange your priorities, you start to kind of notice that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same way, kind of growing up in the same spot, same neighborhood. I kind of got a little complacent with the beauty around me, and my wife's from out of state. She grew up in Chicago, and then she actually transplanted to Texas halfway through growing up. So I got a connection to Texas. She grew up in San Antonio there for the second
Oh,
half of
nice.
her
Yeah.
teenage life. So got a chance to get out there and visit the Alamo and San Antonio and the Riverwalk and all that stuff down there. We went to Green, which is really cool. Um,
And thank
and so
goodness you
anyway,
said it
her
correctly.
how do other people pronounce it, like Gruen or
Yeah,
Gruen?
exactly.
Well, some people, the city that I live in is called Tononasassa, and it's hilarious trying to hear people say it and spell it. So I understand, but anyways, her coming to Tampa and then kind of getting exposed to the area around here, just seeing it from a fresh perspective kind of helped, and then through my kids' eyes too. I mean, this is what they know, so just seeing them growing up and appreciate palm trees and things like that, which it's cool. I take it for granted. So but yeah, to your point about the troll, I I don't, my account's not huge, and it's not it's growing, but I haven't really received a ton of negative feedback, and I've struggled with that too, because I take it personally, when someone does something like that, whenever they say something negative, because my whole vibe is positive. I'm trying to encourage people. I'm not trying to tear anybody down, and so my approach has just kind of been, just ignore it, don't engage with it, kind of thing, which might not be appropriate, might not be the way to handle it, but you know, I have found that like the only time I get negative feedback is on like anything that's mildly controversial. Like I put up a post around 4th of July that was patriotic. And of course, that got some people who are anti patriotic at that point in time. So, it is what it is. But, my page is just a lot like yours. It's just trying to encourage people and motivate people to get outside, appreciate nature, and you don't see a lot of pictures with my ugly mug in it either. So I try to focus on landscape as well. And there's really awesome spots in Florida that I'm learning about, and as this show grows and as I'm getting more and more of a network built here in the local area, I'm getting exposed to parks and springs and rivers and stuff that I didn't really realize were there. One of the earliest episodes I did, one of my buddies took me to Ocala National Forest, and that there is a spring up there that looks like something straight out of Jurassic Park. I mean, it's gorgeous, and would not think that was something that was in Florida, but you just got to get exposed to. You got to get connected with people and learn. And so that's why I'm really drawn to what you got going on, man, because I think that you're doing a really great job of exposing people to what Texas has to offer, and you're doing it in a way that's very informative and like not from a like an arrogant standpoint of like I'm telling you should go here because I'm going there kind of thing. It's just information, take it or leave it, and you have a very like humble approach to how you're approaching these different areas and enlightening the people that follow your show and follow your Instagram. So keep up the good work, man. I got to give you some kudos on that. I think it's really cool what you're doing, and it's unique. I like what you got going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And the podcast is really due to listening to your stories and the storytelling and kind of learning like I like listening to this, and I don't even live where he lives, and maybe people will enjoy this from the Texas perspective. So you really opened my eyes to kind of that style. I I didn't I don't I don't even know like why I decided to listen more, besides like I wanted to kind of hear where you were going with the story, because to be honest, like I'll probably get some comments for this, but like I didn't really listen to podcasts before yours. And I'm pretty selective with them now. Because I always thought they were a certain way or a certain theme or a certain genre, and the storytelling part of that is really what kind of drew me to what you do. And so I definitely owe a lot of that to your style and your courage, really, because I think people forget, like, kind of putting ourselves out there like that, at least for me, isn't kind of the first thing that I want to do. It is pretty uncomfortable, and YouTube for me was really uncomfortable when I first started that. So just being on video, you like a lot of people, you have doubts, and it's like, well, is anyone going to find this interesting? But I think the biggest thing, especially for anyone out there that's like on the fence about whether they should tell their own story or make their own videos, is do it because you really enjoy it and you really enjoy where you're at. Don't do it for like other people's um feedback or whatever. Just do it because you enjoy the story. And I think um I can definitely tell when I listen to you, like, you really like what you're saying, you really like the information, you really feel passionate about where you're at and kind of just bringing people together, especially when you have people on or buddies, especially in some of the videos I've seen, like, I definitely feel like one of the things that I that kind of makes me cringe because I think people get lost in social media, and I've always told people like Instagram is like the top 10 plays of the week. You're getting the best of a lot of people's stuff, and I think what I'm drawn to is the people that just put a kind of what they're passionate about, and they're not trying to like fancy it up. We're just kind of telling stories. So um,
Yeah.
bravo to you to keep that going and just doing your thing and not trying to fit into someone else's like opinion or style, and I think that's what
Yeah.
separates some of the other people is just some of the accounts or stories or videos that I'm drawn to. They're just kind of doing it because they love to share the story, and I think that's important.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. And I mean, that's what the Trail Connection is all about, is just being real and raw and, connecting with folks and learning and growing. And, I've been kind of walking this thing slow a little bit the last year and a half or so. It's hard to believe I've been going that long already. But, starting with my circle, people that have influenced me in my life or that I'm still close to, that I hang out with or whatever, and bringing them on the show. And then as I, meet different coworkers or meet different people at parks or get connected through social media, trying to grow that network a little bit and just make it organic, like I think there's so much of the copy and paste stuff out there where, people are just finding the formula that works to get popular and they do it, and it is what it is. But to me, that doesn't seem genuine. Like anybody can go find a great landscape and throw a pretty girl in there, and then you got 1,000 followers off overnight. Like that's not me. It's not my style. So it might take me several years, but I'll get there and keep growing and keep doing what I'm doing. But yeah, like I appreciate what you said, because it's something that I am passionate about, something that it may seem a little all over the place. I have a general path that I'm following, but I'm kind of like weaving it pretty pretty crazy right now. But there is a goal, and ultimately we'll get there. But along the way, I'm just trying to find stuff that interests me, that excites me, and also like other people that I interact with, something that would pique their interest or want them to join in and kind of see what we got going on. So, it's been interesting. I know you mentioned in your latest episode that you took a little bit of a break too, and I took a pretty long break. I basically took the last quarter of 2020 off, just because we had a lot going on personally. But I when I came back, everyone's always told me, got to be consistent. You got to keep that info out there. You got to keep people hooked. And I got to tell you, I've grown more in the last 2 months than I did all last year. And I think it's because I took that time to really hone in on like what I'm doing and get passionate again, and like, really focus on the quality. And so to anybody listening that's kind of doing what we're doing, that would be my advice to you, is just like keep going, but take the breaks as you need to, but also just make sure what you're doing you're passionate about and it's quality stuff. It's not just throwing junk up because you got to throw junk up, and hoping that somebody likes it or hoping that something sticks. And that's probably completely counterintuitive to advice that more advanced and successful people would give you. But, the people that have connected with me have been here for a long time. Like I haven't had too many people that have come in contact with my show and been like, oh, that's cool, and then moved on. I mean, I'm sure those people have been there, but I've had a pretty core base of support for the year and a half that I've been doing this. And, so that's a huge thank you to you guys who are listening and continue to listen through my inconsistencies. But, I just think that it's important for us to just put out stuff that we're proud of and put out stuff that means something to us. And so, I know that you do that. I think that there's a lot of things that you put up that are really meaningful. Your posts are really meaningful. You put a lot of time, I think, into what you write, on your posts and the things that you say on your show. And so that's admirable. So I'll definitely keep encouraging anybody who wants to do that kind of thing, because I think that the world needs that. The world needs real.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's why I stopped, or that's why I've taken the break, this most recent one, kind of as long as I did, because you do kind of get in your head a little bit, or you can easily get in your head a little bit. And I was a little obsessed about hitting that kind of anniversary mark, but for no particular reason. I decided it'd be neat to kind of have an episode that ended the year on the same date that I started it. And so I was kind of fixated on that, but filling in those weeks with content that I didn't give myself enough time for, or wasn't quite right. And I those kind of last three episodes, with the exception of the interviews, because I had done those kind of previously. But some of that stuff, you're kind of just forcing it. And it was stuff that I had written, so I knew I liked it because I had previously used it as a post and then used it as a script. So the content I was happy with, but just kind of how I was doing it, I was like, you know what, like this, I'm starting to get to a place where I'm not doing this for the reason why I want to. And I was like, man, that's it. That's it for this year. That's it for a little bit. I'm gonna take a breather, and wasn't really sure when I was gonna start back up again, and kind of, you know, I was like, well, maybe I should kind of space them out a little bit and not feel like I'm obligated to hit um, this time frame, because ultimately the podcast and the videos are really kind of what I do just as extra for fun. And I like learning new things. Learning to edit video was kind of a fun new challenge, and learning to um not very well, but edit audio. Like all these things were just fun kind of projects for me to take on, because especially since I gave up drinking, like filling my free time with things that keep me busy is really important for me. And so all
Mhm.
these projects are kind of part of that. And but yeah, that first one back was one of my favorite visits to a state park, and I definitely felt a lot better and a lot more energetic and a lot happier because I gave myself that time and I wasn't forcing it or forcing myself to hit this made up deadline that I'm not getting paid. I don't have like a company that's hassling me or an editor that needs me to hit a deadline. This is just stuff that I put on myself. So it felt really good to kind of give myself that time
Yeah.
in between. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I got two things for you before we wrap up. So, first of all, if what's your go-to outdoor activity? Are you gonna be hiking, camping, or fishing? What's the first thing you're gonna do if you got an opportunity to do it?
so hiking first and foremost, that is the thing that I'm drawn to, and that's why it's Texas Trailhead. And I try to kind of stay within that. While I really enjoy camping, hiking for me is, for one, for just kind of burning energy. So I get a lot of flack for that too, because I hike. I mean, I'm not. There's no trophies for speed, but I hike really fast. I try to keep my pace up because I want to get miles in. Like I'm trying to challenge myself to burn some calories, to burn some energy, just because it really helps kind of clear my head, and it kind of just helps with my calmness. So hiking first and foremost. That being said, if I'm at a park that has water, if I can fish at the end of my day, that's kind of like the perfect day off. Um, and thankfully, Texas has a lot of opportunities to hike and fish, so that's kind of cool.
All right, and then the last thing, that I wanted to throw out there is what is a go-to spot? So my wife and I just bought a bus that we're going to convert to a schoolie. We're converting it to an RV. So we will be taking a trip out west, and we'll be swinging through Texas. So I gotta know what's the top spot? What's one of your top favorites that you would recommend visiting?
Oh boy, that is not a question that I really, really enjoy answering. Because the different parks I think mean different things to me. So for the park that'll be the most special to me is Enchanted Rock. I think visually it's a huge kind of monolith, or not monolith, but it's a huge kind of granite dome. So just like looking at it, you're like, okay, that's a huge rock. And but for me, like it's really special because that was the first state park that I went to, and the hike to the top of that, to that dome isn't really super challenging, but it is kind of a fun way to spend an afternoon. So I think Enchanted Rock is definitely a place that everyone should visit at least once. Kind of how I feel about Franklin Barbecue. I think everyone should go at least one time, and then kind of make up your own decision how you feel about it after. But getting that one out of the way, uh, you know, I think there's something to be said about the East Texas pines. I think Caddo Lake is a really cool place to visit. It's a really small park. It was a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be, but it's just really majestic. I'm actually looking at a photo of it because it's my desktop background. As I'm talking to you, I'm also looking at the bald cypress trees that are coming out from the water that are at the state park. And it's a very kind of photogenic park for people that are interested in showcasing that. So, East Texas, I say Caddo Lake, Central Texas ish, Enchanted Rock, but there's a lot of really pretty Central Texas parks. I think up north, Palo Duro, the canyon, the you know, second to Grand Canyon in the US, is a really neat place. And I always think about how fun that was for people that were exploring that area for the first time because you don't know it's really there. All of a sudden, this canyon just appears out of nowhere. So, how fun that would have been to explore. Um, and then, you have your West Texas, you have Big Bend, which is on the list. It's a place that I haven't been to yet because I want to do it right and I want to give it the right amount of time. Um, and then Guadalupe Mountains, so out west. I think those are kind of the big. That's kind of a cheat answer, but Texas
Yeah.
is huge, so
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to narrow it.
No, I didn't give you any forewarning with that. I kind of sprung it on you, so I think you did good.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it hits the key points of kind of the things you want to see. There's some great state parks on the coast, but I think there's so much more stuff you can do without feeling like you have to force yourself to go to a state park on the Texas
Yeah.
coast. We have a really good. There's multiple park systems that kind of operate down there, so I think if you were
Yeah.
only able to go for, I'd go to the big ones, the big key park areas.
Okay. Well, good deal, man. Well, I appreciate you taking some time this evening to talk with me and coming on the show. And to all my listeners, be sure to go check out Danny's page, the Texas Trailhead. And is the website the same, texastrailhead.com?
TexasTrailhead.com, despite it not being operational today. Hopefully, when
Okay.
this comes out, it's going to be up and running.
Okay, yeah. So check out the information he's got for hiking in Texas and camping in Texas and all that good stuff. And I really think you got a good thing going. So keep up the good work. And I appreciate the encouragement you've given me along the way. You have been one of the first followers that I had early on that really it's been good. I know you've kind of touched base with me a couple times throughout the time over the last year and a half or so, and I appreciate personally the feedback and just the encouragement to keep going. And it's really cool to connect with folks that, you kind of known from a distance digitally, and, kind of see you face to face and chat for a little bit. And, we're all on the same team trying to do the same thing. So it's good to support the community and just try to help people get outdoors and focus on reconnecting with the beautiful scenery around them. So appreciate the time, Danny. Look forward to talking with you again, and we'll try to link up whenever we swing through Texas and do an in-person show. That'll be a lot better.
Absolutely. Much respect to you and everything that you do, and I look forward to checking in with you when you're cruising through the Lone Star State.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave me a nice review there. I greatly appreciate that. If you're watching this on YouTube, also hit that subscribe button and turn on those alerts. Drop me a comment and let me know what you think of the show. Looking for us on social media, you can find us at The Trail Connection on Instagram and Facebook. We share lots of cool photos of nature and some nice deep thoughts about those photos. And be sure to give us a follow, give us a like, check out what we got going on a daily basis. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. My name is Tim Garland, aka Mitty, and you're listening to the Trail Connection Podcast.